Hello and welcome to our weekly news bulletin, brought to you by Aid to the Church in Need Malta office, a pontifical foundation assisting persecuted Christians around the world. In today's highlights, food for the hungry, emergency aid to displaced people in Mozambique, ACN-backed program protecting Pakistani girls, stop blocking vital aid, knowledge, the foundation of peace, a wall to protect the seminarians. Hello once again, and we start off with food for the hungry. Emergency food parcels are being sent by Aid to the Church in Need to displaced people in Mozambique, struggling for their lives after fleeing Islamic terror. ACN is helping priests and sisters reach out to more than 360,000 displaced people facing acute hunger in Capo Delgado, north of the country. The project comes amid reports of people escaping mass beheadings by Islamist groups in a region terrorized by Ansar al-Sunnah, militants linked to ISIS. The ACN aid is part of a program including clean water and sanitation for the displaced families living in camps where there has been an outbreak of cholera and a surge of COVID-19 cases. ASEAN Africa project coordinator Ulrich Knie said, almost weekly, new horror stories from Mozambique reach to Aid to the Church in Need. Mr. Knie said that, in spite of international relief efforts, there is an acute scarcity of food and rising cases of cholera linked to poor hygiene in the camps. He said, the Church in Mozambique is an anchor of hope and charity in a sea of suffering and violence. That is why we have made this country a top priority. Mr. Knie said Sister Ramos Queiroz had reported widespread attacks on Christian communities, with several churches destroyed completely, and that 26 of the 23 parishes of the diocese in Pemba are now deserted. The sister told Mr. Knie that, despite this, a sister and a priest are working in one of the abandoned villages, helping poor people too poor to flee. We turn on to ACN backing program protecting Pakistani girls. A fresh initiative is about to be launched to tackle Pakistani's growing crisis of Christian and Hindu girls who are being abducted and sexually abused. With backing from Aid to the Church in Need, Pakistani's National Catholic Commission for Peace and Justice will start a campaign to protect and safeguard the rights of vulnerable girls from religious minorities. Father Emmanuel Yousaf, director of the CCJP, said that last year, 2020, one of the most noted challenges has been the recent rise in cases of abduction, forced marriage, and forcible conversion. This phenomenon, though not new, has catalyzed during the recent past due to the lack of adequate laws and the absence of implementation of existing safeguards to protect the young minor girls and women from the religious minority community. The CCJP initiative to protect minority girls will include consultations with politicians and other decision makers at both state and national level, promoting community awareness about the program and providing legal help for victims. Father Youssef said, we at CCJP have been documenting and monitoring these incidents of abductions, forced marriage, and conversion. CCJP believes that in order to initiate and effect change, there is a need to engage both nationally and internationally to raise a voice, demand that the state takes adequate action, and also mobilize a public appeal for legislation. According to Pakistan's Movement for Solidarity and Peace, every year up to 1,000 Christian and Hindu girls and women aged between 12 and 25 years were abducted. Stop blocking vital aid. An urgent call to end the block on vital aid to people in sanctions crippled Syria has come from Aid to the Church in Need, amid fears that the country's humanitarian crisis has reached an extreme. ACN is demanding changes to allow milk, groceries, warm clothes, medicine, and pastoral help to get through to Syria where the United Nations says 60% of people are at risk of famine, with inflation rising to nearly 300%. Amid increasing criticism of the sanctions, ASEAN's executive president, Dr. Thomas Heingelden, called on Western nations to intervene amid growing concerns of a surge in hunger and disease. He said that although ASEAN is on course to complete nearly 1,000 projects in Syria since the civil war broke out 10 years ago, and payments are being repeatedly blocked, even though they are permitted under the current sanctions regime. In an appeal to governments in the United States and Europe, Dr. Hein Gelden said, "It is our duty to provide help to the suffering civil population in Syria, and especially to the rapidly dwindling Christian minority. In the name, I beg you to implement the existing international legal framework, which allows humanitarian exemptions to the embargo. Our partners on the ground are offering hope and help, but they face being blocked even on humanitarian and pastoral payments because banks are too afraid to let funds reach Syria, even when officially permitted." We now turn on to knowledge, the foundation of peace. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote that faith is a foretaste of the knowledge that will make us blessed in the life to come. And this insight must be joined with St. Augustine's observation that what you wish to ignite in others must first burn within you. In St. Augustine's seminary in Jos, in Nigeria's Middle Belt, Oduh John Peter describes how he finally resolved his doubts. He was faced with the choice between becoming either a pharmacist or a priest. So he applied for both courses of study, telling himself that whichever was the first to offer him a place would be a sign from God. The diocese was the first to phone him. As soon as he put on his seminarian soutane, he says, "I felt like an angel." He experienced a burning love for God and wanted to be as close to Him as possible. Then there were his studies. The books about the faith were well springs of deeper knowledge, and they also kept him grounded, just as they also kept the other 342 seminarians firmly grounded in the truth. Knowledge is also a source of strength, so the seminary library is a kind of spiritual gym. But in order for it to remain so, the library needs to be constantly renewed and updated. Among the most recent examples of this renewal are noted classics of the interior life, testimonies of modern saints like Mother Teresa and Pope St. John Paul II, books on theology of the body, and also, and increasingly, works on comparative religious studies and topics such as culture and enculturation. And the students in JOS particularly need to familiarize themselves with all aspects of Islam. All this will help their ministry when they are priests and pastors proclaiming the truth. Given the huge number of students and the sheer size of the study groups, all these books are needed, and 10 copies are needed at a time. Even with heavy discounting, this still adds up to a very considerable financial outlay. ACN promised the seminary its help. Another way of kindling the flame of charity among the peoples of West Africa is that taken by the Institute of Islamic Christian Formation, IFIC, in Bamako, Mali. For some years now, radical forms of Islam have been spreading in the region, seeking to set hitherto moderate Muslims against their Christian and animist neighbors. The IFIC aims to keep priests, pastors, religious, and lay Christians up to date with the latest developments in dialogue with Islam and the traditional African animist religions. The close on 150 participants on the 1 year courses, half of them priests, come from almost every nation of West Africa, and there is very limited space to accommodate them. A lecture hall with an attached accommodation block for the students and professors would be a real boost to the IFIC's work promoting peace and would give new impetus to the ongoing dialogue. The land for this university complex has already been secured, but they do not have the resources to start building. Aid to the Church in Need promised to help. Knowledge helps lay the foundations of peace, both temporal and spiritual. And as Pope Francis has said, a renewal of preaching can offer believers new joy in the faith and fruitfulness in the work of evangelization. We now turn on to our next item, a wall to protect the seminarians. Have mercy on me, God, in your kindness. In your compassion, blot out my offense. Oh, wash me more and more from my guilt, and cleanse me from my sin. 1 year ago, the Requiem Mass for Michael Mnadi began with Psalm 50. He had been abducted along with three other seminarians from the Good Shepherd Seminary in Kaduna, central northern Nigeria. That was in January 2020, shortly after the seminarians had returned to the seminary after celebrating Christmas with their families. The revolver men, as the rector Father Habila Dabo described the armed gang, attacked in the night, breaking down the door of the dormitory, and on hearing the seminary guards arriving, seized the four seminarians as hostages and fled. Three of them were essentially set free a few weeks later, but Michael was not. His lifeless body was discovered abandoned. So now the fervent prayers of his 268 brother seminarians are rising up to heaven on his behalf. His death was a turning point. Ever since then, there has been an atmosphere of insecurity among the seminarians, and many are afraid. The extensive grounds of the seminary are enclosed by a fence some 2.8 kilometers in length, but it is not difficult to penetrate, and the guards cannot be everywhere at once. The Good Shepherd Seminary is in northern Nigeria, where Christians are a minority, and where the threat of Islamist terror lurks everywhere. And then there are the roving gangs of bandits, fired with racist hatred and religious fanaticism, who make the whole area unsafe. The original intention was to surround the whole complex with a high wall, but the cost was simply too high. Now, the bishops have decided to return to the initial plan, as the security of the seminarians and their teachers is at stake. The rector, Father Habila Dabois, is also worried that some of the seminarians, who are not yet firm in their trust in God, may be tempted to leave the seminary because of their fears. We are already making sure that the seminarians actually see the guards at their posts before they retire to sleep, he explains. This at least helps to reassure them, but a wall would bring long term peace of mind. ACN does not routinely provide fences and protective walls, but situations like the one in Kaduna are clearly exceptional. ACN promised to fund this almost 3-kilometer long protective wall. Vocations not only need the sunshine of grace and the water of knowledge in order to flourish, but also a sense of security and protection from the storms of fanaticism, especially in their earlier years. For €150, you too can give them 10 meters of security wall and so help protect the future of Christianity in Nigeria. This brings us to the end of this bulletin. Thank you for your attention. Those of you interested to know more about Aid to the Church in Need work may visit our website www.acnmalta.org. Thank you once again, and may I wish you all a blessed week.